Hello, guess who's back? It's me, and my massive cup of tea to assist me in getting through this. I want to try and drink it, but I know that it's currently flame tea and will hurt me. But check this out, a T-Rex. My little strainer, he's going back in now. He sunk. Um, well. Welcome to Middle. Isn't that great, Dane? Look at these. These are the things that you get when you show up. A T-Rex. Welcome to Middlemarch. I do not know what's going to happen in this book. I have little to no idea. An exciting thing is, though, as I was leafing through this, thanks, Dean. I think I've been like really struggling with my hair in Zoom class because it's like you either look like an egg if I have my hair all pulled back, not a move, or like my hair is just like everywhere, also not a move. I need to be able to do things and look cute. So now I'm gonna try this. She's a little labor intensive. It's a little hard to get her into the braids, but it's okay. But what I was saying was that while I was leafing through this book, I found a mysterious receipt a la Catherine Morland. And unlike Catherine Morland, I did not immediately assume the worst. I kept my wits about me, and I just read the receipt. And I assume it was my mother, due to the two books which she purchased at Bookstar in San Diego, California. She purchased Middlemarch and Caring for Your Cat. And she purchased these in 1994, which is 4 years before I was born. I forgot what the date was. In the one before July. June? January, February, March, and April. May. No. The one before June. Wow. I'm so excited. I don't think I've ever been to Bookstar. I was pretty much I was Barnes and Noble. I'm very sorry to report. Except there was this one used bookstore in the Pacific Northwest called the Duval Bookstore. I loved that bookstore almost more than I loved myself. What? What do you mean isn't Bookstar Barnes and Noble? I'm confused. Someone needs to explain this to me. There was a little used bookstore in this tiny little town that my grandfather lived in. It was so great. The books were so cheap and wonderful. And I just spent many, many happy days there. But the hipsters moved in and decided that they wanted a bike store instead. So the Duval bookstore is no more. There's a store in the next town over, which is a pale. Actually, that store has a cat, so it does have one up on the Duval bookstore. Is the bookstore cat. Okay. I'm going to try and take a sip of my flame tea, regret it immediately, and then let's get started. It's peach? No. It's like peach apricot, I think. It smells divine. It smells really sweet, and I have honey from also the Pacific Northwest, little town that my grandfather lives in. So life is. I'm trying to just sip with my teeth. That's my expert tip on tea sipping. It's also definitely what they tell you to do in England. Like, say if you were having high tea with the Queen, that is definitely the technique that you should replicate. Just in case you were worried. No, is today scarf day? Oh my God. Hold the phone. Everybody entertain yourselves. I'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. We talk. Look, a scarf. The scarf is from Versailles. It's got little. I think they're strawberries, but maybe they're not. I think they're supposed to be rose petals and rose blossoms for you. So sorry. Oh, okay. Let's see. For some reason, I thought you were in New York this whole time, Dane, but I think it's just because you're going to NYU, but doing it from. Whew, that was my cardio for today. But doing it from where you may be. Vegas. There we go. Okay, let's do this. This is Middlemarch, which says it's written. That'll do. Says it's written by George Eliot, but is really written by Marianne Evans. Go, Marianne. Wait. Yes. Marianne Evans. Go, Marianne. Let's read the back and then let's do this. It's a little toasty in here. Okay. I don't think this. No, it doesn't have a back really. So we're just going to go into this completely cold and see what happens. There's like not a movie of this. There's a bunch of TV shows, but there's not a movie. I lost my receipt, which is going to serve as my bookmark. Alrighty. Excuse me. Interesting. You're right. You are entirely right. Middlemarch, A Study of Provincial Life by George Eliot, Volume 1. There's a prelude. Never seen a prelude in a book before. Usually in a musical. Prelude. Who that cares much to know the history of man, and how the mysterious mixture behaves under the varying experiments of time, has not dwelt, at least briefly, on the life of Saint Teresa, has not smiled with some gentleness at the thought of the little girl walking forth one morning, hand in hand with her still smaller brother, to go and seek martyrdom in the country of the Moors. What? This is a whew. I don't know what's going on. Out they toddled from rugged Avia. Are we confused? What's happening? Wide-eyed and helpless, looking as two fawns, but with human hearts, already beating to a national idea, until domestic reality met them in the shape of uncles and turned them back from their great resolve. Oh, yeah. That child pilgrimage was a fit beginning. Teresa's passionate, ideal nature demanded an epic life. What were many volumed romances of chivalry and the social conquests of a brilliant girl to her? Her flame quickly burned up that light fuel, and fed from within, soared after some illimitable satisfaction, some object which would never justify weariness, which would reconcile self-despair with the rapturous consciousness of a life beyond self. She found her epos in the reform of a religious order. That Spanish woman who lived 300 years ago was certainly not the last of her kind. Many Teresas have been born who found for themselves no epic life, wherein there was a constant unfolding of far resident action, perhaps only a life of mistakes, the offspring of a certain spiritual grandeur ill-matched with the meanness of opportunity, perhaps a tragic failure which found no sacred poet and sank unwept into oblivion. With dim lights and tangled circumstance, they tried to shape their thought and deed in noble agreement. But after all, to common eyes, their struggles seemed merely mere inconsistency and formlessness, for these latter-born Teresas were helped by no coherent social faith and order which could perform the function of knowledge for the ardently willing soul. Their ardor alternated between a vague ideal and the common yearning of womanhood, so that the one was disapproved as extravagance and the other condemned as a lapse. Some have felt that these blundering lives are due to the inconvenient indefiniteness with which the supreme power has fashioned the natures of woman. If there were one level of feminine incompetence as strict as the ability to count three and no more, the social lot of woman might be treated with scientific certitude. Meanwhile, the indefiniteness remains, and the limits of variation are really much wider than any one would imagine from the sameness of woman's coiffure and the favorite love stories in prose and verse. Here and there a cygnet is reared uneasily among the ducklings in the brown pond, and never finds the living stream in fellowship with its own oary-footed kind. Here and there is born a Saint Teresa, foundress of nothing, whose loving heartbeats and sobs after an unattained goodness tremble off and are dispersed among hindrances instead of centering in some long recognizable deed. What an intro. what a world. What a collection of words was that? I feel that this was like saying like someone special has been born. Is my assumption correct? That's what I got from that. Like, sometimes special people occur, but we can't always see them. Okay, I don't really understand either, but I really did like it. Cause I think it was maybe like, because I always hesitate to like think that the author is like, not all women are like fantastic and smart. But sometimes some women are fantastic and smart. I don't want it to be that, but I think sometimes I mean if it were not just like if it were like sometimes not all people are fantastic and smart, then I would be like, okay, yeah, like it's true there are some dummies out here, myself included. That's what I got from that. But what prose, Horatio? What prose? That is not a real quote. Okay. Chapter 1. Since I can do no good because a woman, reach constantly at something that is near it. The maid's tragedy, Beaumont, Beaufort, perhaps, and Fletcher. Beaumont? That was a little quote. Miss Brooks had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress. Her hand and wrist were so finely formed that she could wear sleeveless, not less bare of style than those in which the Blessed Virgin appeared to Italian painters, and her profile as well as her stature and bearing seemed to gain the more dignity from her plain garments, which by the side of provincial fashion gave her the impressiveness of a fine quotation from the Bible, or from one of our elder poets, in a paragraph of today's newspaper. Aw, no, Beaufort was a tool. She was usually spoken of as being remarkably clever, but with the addition that her sister Celia had more common sense. Nevertheless, Celia wore scarcely more trimmings, and it was only to close observers that her dress differed from her sister's, and had a shade of coquetry in its arrangements. For Miss Brooks' plain dressing was due to mixed conditions, in it most of which her sister shared. The pride of being ladies had something to do with it. The Brooke connections, though not exactly aristocratic, were unquestionably good. If you inquired backward for a generation or two, you would find not any yard measuring or parcel tying forefeathers. Forefathers. I don't know what a forefeather is. Um, Anything lower than an admiral or a clergyman, and there was even an ancestor discernible as a Puritan gentleman who served under Cromwell. Now, from my remembrance, Cromwell was not a good thing, right? Cromwell did some bad shit, right? I don't remember AP European history. But didn't he kill some people? I'm not sure though. Don't quote me on that, historians. Hey, hello. You haven't missed anything yet. We're like what, 7 pages in? Oh God. Um, we've just been introduced to a woman who's hot, and her name is Miss Brooks, and she has a sister who seems to be a little less hot, but very smart, and we like her. Um, is it is something? Is something the matter? Shiv, did you hit the mute button? I'm just gonna pontificate. Okay, we'll wait. I'll hold. Um, I'll catch John up, assuming that John can still hear. um, Basically, there was a prelude. There's not usually a prelude, but get ready, Dane. Just find a PDF. It's almost the same. Um, okay, great. There was a prelude that was basically like sometimes very fantastic people are born, and sometimes they aren't. Sometimes fantastic people are born, and you know that they're fantastic, and they turn into Saint Teresa. Are you back? Okay, great. Um, and sometimes those fantastic people don't ever get like recognized, but they're still fantastic. And that's my takeaway. I don't know if I got that right, but that's what we're here to do. Okay, we were just talking about Cromwell. A Puritan gentleman who served under Cromwell, but afterwards conformed and managed to come out of all political troubles as the proprietor of a respectable family estate. Young woman of such birth, living in a quiet country house and attending a village church hardly larger than a parlor, naturally regarded frippery as the ambition of a huckster's daughter. A huckster? um, Cromwell. um, Then there was well-bred economy, which in those days made show and dress the first item to be deducted from, when any margin was required for expenses more distinctive of rank. Such reasons would have been enough to account for plain dress, quite apart from religious feeling. But in Miss Brooke's case, religion alone would have determined it, and Celia mildly acquiesced in all her sister's sentiments, only infusing them with that common sense which is able to accept momentous doctrines without any eccentric agitation. Dorothea knew many passages of Pascal's Pensies. Say that 5 times fast. Passages of Pascal's Pensies. Um, and of Jeremy Taylor's and of Jeremy Taylor by heart, and to her the destinies of mankind, seen by the light of Christianity, made the solicitudes of feminine fashion appear an occupation for Bedlam. She could not reconcile the anxieties of a spiritual life involving eternal consequences with a keen interest in gump and artificial protrusions of drapery. Her mind was theoretic and yearned by its nature after some lofty conception of the world which might frankly include the parish of Tipton and her own rule of conduct there. She was enamored of intensity and greatness, and rash in embracing whatever seemed to her to have those aspects, likely to seek martyrdom, to make retractions, and then to incur martyrdom after all in a quarter where she had not sought it. Certainly, such elements in the character of a marriageable girl tended to interfere with her lot, and hinder it from being decided according to custom by good looks, vanity, and merely canine affection. What is a canine affection? I don't know what canine affection is. That's what it said. Ooh, that is good tea. Canine affection. With all this, she, the elder of the sisters, was not yet 20, and they had both been educated since they were about 12 years old and had lost their parents, on plans at once narrow and promiscuous. What? First in an English family, and afterwards in a Swiss family at Lausanne. Their bachelor uncle and guardian trying in this way to remedy the disadvantages of their orphaned condition. It was hardly a year since they had come to live at Tipton Grange with their uncle, a man nearly 60, of acquiescent temper, miscellaneous opinions, and uncertain vote. He had travelled in his younger years, and was held in this part of the country to have contracted a too rambling habit of mind. Mr. Brooke's conclusions were as difficult to predict as the weather. It was only safe to say that he would act with benevolent intentions, and that he would spend as little money as possible in carrying them out. But the most gluttonously indefinite minds enclose some hard gains of habit, and a man has been seen lax about all his own interests, except the retention of his snuff-box, concerning which he was watchful, suspicious, and greedy of clutch. Mr. Brooke, the hereditary strain of Puritan energy was clearly in abeyance, but in his niece Dorothea it glowed alike through faults and virtues, turning sometimes into impatience of her uncle's talk or his way of letting things be on his estate, and making her long all the more for the time when she would be of age and have some command of money or generous schemes. She was regarded as an heiress, for not only had the sisters 700 a year, each from their parents, but if Dorothea married and had a son, that son would inherit Mr. Brooke's estate, presumably worth about 3,000 a year, a rental which seemed wealth to provincial families. Still discussing Mr. Peel's late conduct on the Catholic question, innocent of future gold fields and of that gorgeous plutocracy which has so nobly exalted the necessities of genteel life. We should look it up. There's got to be a converter. Dang, that tea is good. It's a really well flavored. Oh my god, I thought it was 16 million. I was like, what? I'll marry her. And how should Dorothea not marry? A girl so handsome and with such prospects? Nothing could hinder it but her love of extremes and her insistence on regulating life according to notions, which might cause a wary man to hesitate before he made her an offer, or even might lead her at last to refuse all offers. A young lady of some birth and fortune, who knelt suddenly down on a brick floor by the side of a sick laborer and prayed fervidly as if she thought herself living in the time of the apostles, who had strange whims of fasting like a Baptist. What the heck is a Baptist? Is it a typo for Baptist? Or is it a new religious order that I have hence not learned about? And is sitting up at night to read old theological books. Such a wife might awaken you some fine morning with a new scheme for the application of her income, which would interfere with political economy and the keeping of saddle horses. A man would naturally think twice before he risked himself in such a fellowship. That's good, right? That's pretty, yeah. Thanks, Dane. I'm doing the Lord's work. You and Dorothea would get along. Women were expected to have weak opinions, but the great safeguard of society and of domestic life was that opinions were not acted on. Sane people did what their neighbors did, so that if any lunatics were at large, one might know and avoid them. Dorothea, isn't it great? It has It has posters for all 3 original Star Wars movies on it. Isn't that fantastic? Um, Dorothea is the hot one, but she's super religious, so she's not married. Um, the rural opinion about the new young ladies, even among the cottagers, was generally in favor of Celia, as being so amiable and innocent looking, while Miss Brooke's large eyes seemed, like her religion, too unusual and striking. Poor Dorothea! Compared with her, the innocent-looking Celia was knowing and worldly wise. So much subtler is a human mind than the outside tissues which make a sort of blazonry or clock-face for it. Yet those who approached Dorothea though prejudiced against her by this alarming heresy, found that she had a charm unaccountably reconcilable with it. Most men thought her bewitching when she was on horseback. She loved the fresh air and the various aspects of the country, and when her eyes and cheeks glowed with mingled pleasure, she looked very little like a devotee. Riding was an indulgence which she allowed herself in spite of conscientious qualms, and she felt that she enjoyed it in a pagan, sensuous way, and always looked forward to renouncing it. That is a big balloon. She was open, ardent, and not in the least self-admiring. Indeed, it was pretty to see how her imagination adorned her sister Celia with attractions altogether superior to her own. And if any gentleman appeared to come to the Grange from some other motive than that of seeing Mr. Brooke, she concluded that he must be in love with Celia. Sir James Chettam, for example, whom she constantly considered from Celia's point of view, inwardly debating whether it would be good for Celia to accept him. That he should be regarded as a suitor to herself would have seemed to her a ridiculous irrelevance. Dorothea, with all her eagerness to know the truths of life, retained very childlike ideas about marriage. She felt sure that she would have accepted the judicious Hooker, but Hooker is capitalized, so I'm assuming it's the last name. If she had been born in time to save him from that wretched mistake he made in matrimony, or John Milton when his blindness had come on, or any of the other great men whose odd habits it would have been glorious piety to endure, but an amiable, handsome baronet who said exactly to her remarks, even when she expressed uncertainty, how could he affect her as a lover? The really delightful marriage must be that where your husband was a sort of father and could teach you even Hebrew if you wished it. I have some questions about that line of thought, Dorothea. These peculiarities of Dorothea's character caused Mr. Brooke to be all the more blamed in neighboring families for not securing some middle-aged lady as guide and companion to his nieces. But he himself dreaded so much the sort of superior woman likely to be available for such a position, that he allowed himself to be dissuaded by Dorothea's objection, and was in this case brave enough to defy the world. That is to say, Mrs. Colwelder, the rector's wife, and the small group of gentry with whom he visited in the northeast corner of Loamshire. So Miss presided in her household and did not at all dislike her new authority, with the homage that belonged to it. Sir James Chettam was going to dine at the Grange today with another gentleman whom the girls had never seen, and about whom Dorothea felt some venerating expectation. This was the Reverend Edward Casaubon, noted in the country as a man of profound learning, understood for many years to be engaged on a great work of... Sorry, I just got scared that next week was a big obligation of mine, but it's not. This was the Reverend Edward Casaubon, noted in the country as a man of profound learning, understood for many years to be engaged on a great work concerning religious history, also as a man of wealth enough to give lustre to his piety, and having views of his own which were to be more clearly ascertained on the publication of his book. His very name carried an impressiveness hardly to be measured without a precise chronology of scholarship. Early in the day, Dorothea had returned from the infant school which she had set going in the village, and was taking her usual place in the pretty sitting room which divided the bedrooms of the sisters, bent on finishing a plan for some buildings, a kind of work which she delighted in, when Celia, who had been watching her with hesitating desires to propose something, said, "Dorothea, if you don't mind, if you are not very busy, suppose we looked at Mamma's jewels today and divided them. It is exactly 6 months today since Uncle gave them to you, and you have not looked at them yet." Celia's face had the shadow of pouting expression, the full presence of pout being kept back by a habitual awe of Dorothea and Principal, two associated facts, which might show mysterious electricity if you touched them incautiously. To her relief, Dorothea's eyes were full of laughter, and she looked up. "What a wonderful little almanac you are, Celia. Is it 6 calendar or 6 lunar months? Imagine if you got asked that question. Be like, what? Calendar?" um, "It is the last day of September now, and it was the 1st of April when Uncle gave them to you. You know, he said that he had forgotten them till then. I believe you have never thought of them since you locked them in the cabinet here." "Well, dear, we should never wear them, you know." Dorothea spoke in a full, cordial tone, half caressing, half explanatory. She had her pencil in her hand and was making tiny side plans on a margin. Celia colored and looked very grave. "I think, dear, we are. Oh, I don't know who's speaking. Okay, yes. Hmm. Okay, no, I think that's Celia. Okay. "I think, dear, we are wanting in respect to Mamma's memory to put them by and take no notice of them. And," she added, after hesitating a little, with a rising sob of mortification, "necklaces are quite usual now, and Madame Poincon, excuse me, are you Madame Poincon? Poincon! Madame Pinecone. I'm gonna call her Madame Pinecone. I'm sorry. Necklaces are quite usual, and Madame, I don't know what this one. I don't know how to do this. Madame Pong. Oh gosh. And Madame Poncon, who was stricter in some things even than you are, used to wear ornaments, and Christians generally. Surely there are women in heaven now who wore jewels." Celia was conscious of some mental strength when she really applied herself to argument. "You would like to wear them?" exclaimed Dorothea, an air of astonished discovery animating her whole person, with a dramatic action which she had caught from that very Madame Pinecone, I can't do it, who wore the ornaments. "Of course, then, well, let us have them out. Why did you not tell me before?" "But the keys, the keys." She pressed her hands against the sides of her head and seemed to despair of her memory. "They are here," said Celia, with whom this explanation had been long meditated and prearranged. "Pray open the large drawer of the cabinet and get out the jewel box." The casket was soon opened before them, and the various jewels spread out, making a bright parterre on the table. It was no great collection, but a few of the ornaments were really of remarkable beauty, the finest that was obvious at first being a necklace of purple amethyst set in exquisite gold work, and a pearl cross with 5 brilliants in it. I have one of those, except it's definitely not pearl, it's definitely a fake costume piece of jewelry. Dorothea immediately took up the necklace and fastened it round her sister's neck, where it fitted almost as closely as a bracelet. But the circle suited the Henrietta Maria style of Celia's head and neck, and she could see that it did in the pier glass opposite. "There, Celia, you can wear that with your Indian muslin, but this cross you must wear with your dark dresses." Celia was trying not to smile with pleasure. "Oh, Dodo, you must keep the cross yourself." "No, no, dear," said Dorothea, putting up her head with careless deprecation. "Indeed you must. It would suit you. In your black dress now." Oh, wait, never mind, that was Celia. "Indeed you must. It would suit you. In your black dress now," said Celia insistingly. "You might wear that." "No, not for the world, not for the world." A cross is the last thing I would wear as a trinket. Dorothea shuddered slightly. Yes, they are sisters. Um, then you will think me wicked to wear it? Said Celia uneasily. No, dear, no, said Dorothea, stroking her sister's cheek. Souls have complexions too. What will suit one will not suit another. I like that. But you might like to keep it for Mamma's sake. No, I have other things of Mamma's. Her sandalwood box, which I am so fond of. Plenty of things. In fact, they are all yours, dear. We need discuss them no longer. There, take away your property. Celia felt a little hurt. There was a strong assumption of superiority in this puritanic toleration, hardly less trying to the blonde flesh of an unenthusiastic sister than a puritanic persecution. A lot of P words in this book. But how can I wear ornaments if you, who are the elder sister, will never wear them? Dorothea. Nay, Celia, that is too much to ask that I should wear trinkets to keep you in countenance. If I were to put on such a necklace as that, I should feel as if I had been pirouetting. The world would go round with me, and I should not know how to walk. Celia had unclasped the necklace and drawn it off. It would be a little tight for your neck. Something to lie down and hang would suit you better, she said with some satisfaction. The complete unfitness of the necklace from all points of view for Dorothea made Celia happier in taking it. She was opening some ring boxes which disclosed a fine emerald with diamonds, and just then the sun passing beyond the clouds sent a bright gleam over the table. How very beautiful. We've transitioned, Dane. I decided I'd give you some variety. Middlemarch is not the name of a house, so we're already on uncertain waters. How very beautiful these gems are, said Dorothea, under a new current of feeling, as sudden as the gleam. It is strange how deeply colors seem to penetrate one like scent. I suppose that is the reason why gems are used as spiritual emblems in the Revelation of St. John. They look like fragments of heaven. I think that emerald is more beautiful than any of them. And there is a bracelet to match it, said Celia. We did not notice this at first. They are lovely, said Dorothea, slipping the ring and bracelet on her finely turned fingers and wrist, and holding them towards the window on a level with her eyes. All the while her thought was trying to justify her delight in the colors by merging them in her mystic religious joy. You would like those, Dorothea, said Celia, rather falteringly, beginning to think with wonder that her sister showed some weakness, and also that emeralds would suit her own complexion even better than purple amethysts. You must keep that ring and bracelet, if nothing else. But see, these agates are very pretty and quiet. Yes, I will keep these. This ring and bracelet, said Dorothea. Then, letting her hand fall on the table, she said in another tone, Yet what miserable men find such things and work at them and sell them? She paused again, and Celia thought that her sister was going to renounce the ornaments as inconsistency she ought to do. Yes, dear, I will keep these, said Dorothea decidedly. But take away the rest and the casket. She took up her pencil without removing the jewels, and still looking at them. She thought of often having them by her to feed her eye with all the little fountains of pure color. Shall you wear them in company? Said Celia, who was watching her with real curiosity as to what she would do. Dorothea glanced quickly at her sister. Across all her imaginative adornment of those whom she loved, there darted now a keen discernment, which was not without scorching quality. If Miss Brooke ever attained perfect meekness, it would not be for lack of inward fire. Perhaps, she said rather haughtily. I cannot tell to what level I may sink. Oh my God. Imagine just trying to be like a young woman growing up and your sister is like Mother Teresa and you're like, I don't know how to deal with this, man. I'm just trying to wear some earrings. Celia blushed and was unhappy. She saw that she had offended her sister and dared not say even anything pretty about the gift of the ornaments, which she put back into the box and carried away. Dorothea, too, was unhappy as she went on with her plan drawing, questioning the purity of her own feeling and speech in the scene which had ended with that little explosion. Celia's consciousness told her that she had not been at all in the wrong. It was quite natural and justifiable that she should have asked that question, and she repeated to herself that Dorothea was inconsistent. Either she should have taken her full share of jewels, or, after what she had said, she should have renounced them altogether. I am sure, at least I trust, thought Celia, that the wearing of the necklace will not interfere with my prayers. And I do not see that I should be bound by Dorothea's opinions. Now we are going into society, though of course she herself ought to be bound by them. But Dorothea is not always consistent. Thus Celia, mutely bending over her tapestry until she heard her sister calling her. Here, Kitty, come and look at my plan. I shall think I am a great architect if I have not got incompatible stairs and fireplaces. As Celia bent over the paper, Dorothea put her cheek against her sister's arm caressingly. Celia understood the action. Dorothea saw that she had been in the wrong, and Celia pardoned her. Since they could remember, there had been a mixture of criticism and awe in the attitude of Celia's mind toward her elder sister. The younger had always worn a yoke, but is there any yoked creature without its private opinions? What kind of... Wow. That was the end of... Should I try? That was the end of chapter 1. Let me get a big old swig of water and move into chapter 2. All right, she's put a quote from Don Quixote in Spanish, and she's also put it in English. I will try to read the Spanish first. Oh, I watched one movie called The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. It was genuinely the weirdest film I've ever seen. All right, are we ready? It's a little paragraph. Dime, ¿no ves aquel caballero que hacia nosotros viene sobre un caballo rocío rodado que trae puesto en la cabeza un yelmo de oro? Lo que veo y colombro, respondido Sancho, no es sino un hombre sobre un asno pardo como el mío, que trae sobre la cabeza una cosa que relumbra. Pues es el yelmo de Mambrino, dijo Don Quixote. Cervantes. Yeehaw. And this is the translation. Seest thou not yon cavalier who cometh toward us on a dapple grey steed, and weareth a golden helmet? What I see, answered Sancho, is nothing but a man on a grey ass like my own, who carries something shiny on his head. Just so, answered Don Quixote, and that resplendent object is the helmet of Mambrino. All right. Middlemarch, chapter 2. These pages are so thin and there's so many of them. Oh my gosh. I'm taking another drink. Sir Humphrey Davy, said Mr. Brooke over the soup in his easy, smiling way, talking up Sir James Chetham's remark that he was studying Davy's agricultural chemistry. Well now, Sir Humphrey Davy, I dined with him years ago at Cartwright's, and Wordsworth was there too. The poet Wordsworth, you know. I think it's Wordsworth, but I'm not going to correct myself. Now, there was something singular. I was at Cambridge when Wordsworth was there, and I never met him, and I dined with him 20 years afterwards at Cartwright's. There's an oddity in things now, but Davy was there. He was a poet too, or, as I may say, Wordsworth was poet one, and Davy was poet two. That was true in every sense, you know. Dorothea felt a little more uneasy than usual. In the beginning of dinner, the party being small and the room still, these motes from the mass of a magistrate's mind, good Lord! She does love some alliteration. Fell too noticeably. She wondered how a man like Mr. Casaubon would support such triviality. His manners, she thought, were very dignified, and the set of his iron grey hair and his deep eye sockets made him resemble the portrait of Locke. Excuse me. He had the spare form and the pale complexion which became a student. As different as possible from the blooming Englishman of the red-whiskered type represented by Sir James Chatham. Oh, God. I don't know who's. I am reading the agricultural chemistry, said this excellent baronet, because I am going to take one of the farms into my own hands and see if something cannot be done in the setting a good pattern of farming among my tenants. Do you approve of that, Miss Brooks? A great mistake, Chatham, interposed Mr. Brooke, going into electrifying your own land and that kind of thing, and making a parlor of your cow-house. It won't do. I went into science a great deal myself at one time, but I saw it would not do. It leads to everything. You cannot let nothing alone. No, no. See that your tenants don't sell their straw and that kind of thing, and give them draining tiles, you know, but your fancy farming will not do. The most expensive sort of whistle you can buy. You may as well keep a pack of hounds. Surely, said Dorothea, it is better to spend money in finding out how men can make the most of the land which supports them all, than in keeping dogs and horses only to gallop over it. It is not a sin to make yourself poor in performing experiments for the good of all. She spoke with more energy than is expected of so young a lady, but Sir James had appealed to her. He was accustomed to do so, and she had often thought that she could urge him to do many good actions when he was her brother-in-law. Mr. Casaubon turned his eyes very markedly on Dorothea while she was speaking, and seemed to observe her newly. Young ladies don't understand political economy, you know, said Mr. Brooks, smiling toward Mr. Casaubon. I remember when we were all reading Adam Smith. There is a book now. I took in all the new ideas at one time. Human perfectibility now. But, oh my God, who is this man? But some say history moves in circles, and that may be very well argued. I have argued it myself. The fact is, human reason may carry you a little too far. Over the hedge, in fact. It carried me a good way at one time, but I saw it would not do. I pulled up in time. But not too hard. I have always been in favor of a little theory. We must have thought, capitalized T. Else we shall be landed back in the Dark Ages. But I am talking of books. There is Southey's Peninsular War. I am reading that of a morning. You know Southey. No, said Mr. Casaubon, not keeping pace with Mr. Brooks' impetuous reason, much like the rest of us, and thinking of the book only. I have little leisure for such literature now. I have been using up my eyesight on old characters lately. The fact is, I want a reader for my evenings, but I am fastidious in voices, and I cannot endure listening to an imperfect reader. Hey, maybe I should apply. Brash ashtray. I was just hoping you guys would be talking about Over the Hedge, and, you know, she's back in the comments. Where was I? Brash ashtray. It is a misfortune in some senses. I feel too much on the inward sources. I live too much with the dead. My mind is something like the ghost of an ancient, wandering about the world and trying mentally to construct it as it used to be, in spite of the ruin and confusing changes. But I find it necessary to use the utmost caution about my eyesight. This was the first time that Mr. Casaubon had spoken at any length. He delivered himself with precision, as if he had been called upon to make a public statement, and the balanced sing-song neatness of his speech, occasionally corresponded to by a movement of his head, was the more conspicuous from its contrast with good Mr. Brooks' scrappy slovenliness. Dorothea said to herself that Mr. Casaubon was the most interesting man she had ever seen, not excepting even Monsieur Lirette, the Vaudoux, clergyman, who had given conference on the history of the Waldenses. To reconstruct a past world, doubtless with a view to the highest purpose of truth. What a work to be in any way present at! in any way present at, to assist in, though only as a lamp holder. This elevating thought lifted her above her annoyance at being twitted with her ignorance of political economy, that never explained science, which was thrust as an extinguisher over all her lights. Who the fuck is Sir James? There are three. Sir James is not Casaubon. Yes. But you are fond of riding, Miss Brooks, said Sir James. Sir James presently took an opportunity of saying, I should have thought you would enter a little into the pleasures of hunting. I wish you would let me send over a chestnut horse for you to try. It has been trained for a lady. I saw you on Saturday cantering over the hill on a nag not worthy of you. My groom shall bring Corydon for you every day if you will only mention the time. Thank you. You are very good. I mean to give up riding. I shall not ride any more, said Dorothea, urged to this brusque resolution by a little annoyance that Sir James, I'm sorry, I think I said John, but it's James. That Sir James would be soliciting her attention when she wanted to give it all to Mr. Casaubon. No, that is too hard, said Sir James, with a tone of reproach that showed strong interest. Your sister is given to self-mortification, is she not? He continued, turning to Celia, who sat at his right hand. I think she is, said Celia, feeling afraid lest she should say something that would not please her sister, and blushing as prettily as possible above her necklace. She likes giving up. It's true. If that were true, Celia, my giving up would be self-indulgence, not self-mortification. But there may be good reasons for choosing not to do what is very agreeable, said Dorothea. Mr. Brooke was speaking at the time, but it was evident that Mr. Casaubon was observing Dorothea, and she was aware of it. Ooh. Exactly, said Sir James. You give up from some high, generous motive. No, indeed, not exactly. I did not say that of myself, answered Dorothea, reddening. Unlike Celia, she rarely blushed, and only from high delight or anger. At this moment she felt angry with the perverse Sir James. Why did he not pay attention to Celia and leave her to listen to Mr. Casaubon? If that learned man would only talk instead of allowing himself to be talked to by Mr. Brooke, who was just then informing him that the Reformation either meant something or it did not, that he himself was a Protestant to the core, but that Catholicism was a fact. And as to refusing an acre of your ground for a Romanist chapel, all men needed the bridle of religion, which, properly speaking, was the dread of a hereafter. A who? I get a drink. I made a great study of theology at one time, said Mr. Brooke, as if to explain the insight just manifested. I know something of all the schools. I knew Wilberforce in his best day. Do you know Wilberforce? Mr. Casaubon said no. Well, Wilberforce was perhaps not enough of a thinker, but I went into Parliament. But if I went into Parliament, as I have been asked to do, I should sit on the independent bench, as Wilberforce did, and work at philanthropy. Mr. Casaubon bowed and observed that it was a wide field. Yes, said Mr. Brooke with an easy smile, but I have documents. I began a long while ago to collect documents. They want arranging, but when a question has struck me, I have written to somebody and got an answer. I have documents in my back. He's got the receipts. But now, how do you arrange your documents? In pigeonholes, partly, said Mr. Casaubon with rather a startled air of effort. Pigeonholes will not do. I have tried pigeonholes, but everything gets mixed in pigeonholes. I never know whether a paper is an A or Z. I wish you would let me sort your papers for you, uncle, said Dorothea. I would letter them all and then make a list of subjects under each letter. Excuse me. Mr. Casaubon gravely smiled approval and said to Mr. Brooke, You have an excellent secretary at hand, you perceive. No, said Mr. Brooke, shaking his head. I cannot let young ladies meddle with my documents. Young ladies are too flighty. This guy reminds me, I don't know if you guys have seen the latest season of The Good Place. This guy reminds me of Brett. I think that was his name. Dorothea felt hurt. Mr. Casaubon would think that her uncle had some special reason for delivering this opinion, whereas the remark lay in his mind as lightly as the broken wing of an insect among all the other fragments there, and a chance current had set it alighting on her. I love The Good Place. Brad, maybe. Um, when the two girls were in the drawing room alone, Celia said, "How very ugly Mr. Casaubon is." "Celia, he is one of the most distinguished looking men I ever saw. He is remarkably like the portrait of Locke. He has the same deep eye sockets." Yeah, season 4. Um, had Locke these two white moles with hairs on them? Oh my god. "Oh, well, I dare say. When people of a certain sort looked at him," said Dorothea, walking away a little. "Mr. Casaubon is so sallow." "All the better. I suppose you admire a man with the complexion of a cocoon de lat? Cocoon? Coupon? I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming it's probably not good. Maybe a food? I don't know. Um, Dodo!" exclaimed Cecilia, looking at her in surprise. "I never heard you make such a comparison before." "Why should I make it before the occasion came? It is a good comparison. The match is perfect." Miss Brooke was clearly forgetting herself, and Celia thought so. "I wonder you show temper, Dorothea. Is it so painful in you, Celia, that you will look at human beings as if they were merely animals with a toilet, and never see the great soul in a man's face? Has Mr. Casaubon a great soul?" Celia was not without a touch of naive malice. "Yes, I believe he has," said Dorothea with the full voice of decision. "Everything I see in him corresponds to his pamphlet on biblical cosmology." Okay, these two are made for each other. Um, "He talks very little," said Celia. "There is no one for him to talk to." Celia thought privately, "Dorothea quite despises Sir James Chatham. I believe she would not accept him." Celia felt that this was a pity. She had never been deceived as to the object of the baronet's interest. Sometimes, indeed, she had reflected that Dodo would perhaps not make a husband happy who had not her way of looking at things, and stifled in the depths of her heart was the feeling that her sister was too religious for family comfort. Notions and scruples were like split needles, making one afraid of treading, or sitting down, or even eating. When Miss Brooks was at the tea table, Sir James came to sit down by her, not having felt her mode of answering him at all offensive. Why should he? He thought it probable that Miss Brooks liked him, and manners must be very marked indeed before they cease to be interpreted by preconceptions either confident or distrustful. She was thoroughly charming to him, but of course he theorized a little about his attachment. He was made of excellent human dough, and had the rare merit of knowing that his talents, even if let loose, would not set the smallest stream in the country on fire. Hence, he liked the prospect of a wife, to whom he could say, "What shall we do about this or that?" who could help her husband out with reasons, and would also have the property qualification for doing so. As to the excessive religiousness alleged against Miss Brooks, I want to say Miss Brooks, but it's a singular Brooke, just one Brooke. I want to be the human equivalent of dough. Sometimes there's these little patches that if you're like mosquito ridden like me, that you can put on, and you'll smell like dough for like you'll smell like yeast, like little yeasted dough. But apparently the mosquitoes don't like it, so there's your tip and trick for today. Where was I? Oh, well, we've almost reached the end of the next chapter. As to the excessive religiousness alleged against Miss Brooke, he had a very indefinite notion of what it consisted in, and thought it would die out with marriage. In short, he felt himself to be in love in the right place, and was ready to endure a great deal of predominance, which, after all, a man could always put down when he liked. Sir James had no idea that he should ever like to put down the predominance of this handsome girl, in whose cleverness he delighted. Why not? A man's mind, what there is of it. Oh my god! Let's recap. Let's rewind and do that again. A man's mind, what there is of it, has always the advantage of being masculine, as the smallest birch tree is of a higher kind than the most soaring palm, and even his ignorance is of a sounder quality. I'm so confused. Sir James might not have originated this estimate, but a kind providence furnishes the limpest personality with a little gum or starch in the form of tradition. Let me hope that you will rescind that resolution about the horse, Miss Brooke, said the persevering admirer. I assure you, riding is the most healthy of exercises. I am aware of it, said Dorothea coldly. I think it would do Celia good if she would take to it. But you are such a perfect horsewoman. Excuse me, I have had very little practice, and I should be easily thrown. Then that is a reason for more practice. Every lady ought to be a perfect horsewoman, that she may accompany her husband. You see how widely we differ, Sir James. I have made up my mind that I ought not to be a perfect horsewoman, and so I should never correspond to your pattern of a lady. Dorothea looked straight before her and spoke with cold brusquerie. Brusquerie? That's like a bruschetta, but different. Very much with the air of a handsome boy, in amusing contrast with the solicitous amiability of her admirer. I should like to know your reasons for this cruel resolution. Is it not possible that you should think horsemanship wrong? It is quite possible that I should think it wrong for me. Oh, why? Said Sir James in a tender tone of remonstrance. Mr. Casaubon had come to the table, teacup in hand, and was listening. We must not inquire too curiously into motives, he interposed in his measured way. Miss Brooks knows that they are apt to become feeble in the utterance. The aroma is mixed with the grosser air. We must keep the germinating grain away from the light. Dorothea colored with pleasure and looked up gratefully to the speaker. Here was a man who could understand the higher inward life, and with whom there could be some spiritual communion. Nay, who could illuminate principle with the widest knowledge? A man whose learning almost amounted to a proof of whatever he believed. Dorothea's inferences may seem large, but really life could never have gone on at any period but for this liberal allowance of conclusion, which has facilitated marriage under the difficulties of civilization. Excuse me. Has anyone ever pinched into its pilulous smallness the cobweb of pre-matrimonial acquaintanceship? Let's try that one more time. Dorothea's inferences. I don't really know what happened there, but it's something about marriage. I don't really know what just went gone. He was not in the least jealous of the interest with which Dorothea had looked up at Mr. Casaubon. Oh, wait, shit. Certainly, said good Sir James. Miss Brooke shall not be urged to tell reasons she would rather keep silent upon. I am sure her reasons would do her honor. He was not in the least jealous of the interest with which Dorothea had looked up at Mr. Casaubon. It never occurred to him that a girl to whom he was mediating an offer of marriage could care for a dried-up bookworm towards 50, except, indeed, in a religious sort of way, as for a clergyman of some distinction. However, since Miss Brooke had been engaged in a conversation with Mr. Casaubon about the Vaudois clergy, Sir James betook himself to Celia and walked to her about her sister, spoke of a house in town, and asked whether Miss Brooke disliked London. Away from her sister, Celia talked quite easily, and Sir James said to himself the second Miss Brooke was certainly very agreeable as well as pretty, though not, as some people pretended, more clever and sensible than the elder sister. He felt that he had chosen the one who was in all respects the superior, and a man naturally likes to look forward to having the best. He would be the very mawworm of bachelors who pretended not to expect it. What the hell is a mawworm? Has anyone ever, it's capitalized with 2 W's. Excuse me, sir. You have a mawworm. That does not sound promising. Let me see how many pages. Oh my god. Okay, 1, 2, 5. Excuse me, sir. A mawworm. Okay. I'm trying to decide if I could do another one tonight. What do you think? Thoughts? Are we tired? Are we ready to not be listening to me? Mawworm. That's what worms in Georgia. We're good. Okay. All right, my friends. Then I will shut it down for tonight. We are sleepy. And I need to make my dinner. It's 8:36 p.m. and I'm making dinner. That's how I like to live my life. So, with that, we will shut this down for tonight and return to the story of Dorothea and Celia next week at 7. Thank you, as always, so much for joining me. It really it really brings me joy to do this with all of you, and it's definitely not nearly as fun when y'all aren't here. So I love you deeply. Excited to do this. Look in your inboxes for my rad virtual birthday party invite and come through and watch a movie with me and other people. But you guys are the veterans. You know what's going on. So did I told you about, I said this at the, oh my gosh, a joy birthday. Happy birthday, Shiv. I forgot that's what Scarf Day meant. I was going to type it in the thing. Are you 21 or 22? Or a different age? 21. Congratulations. I feel like you're probably not having a party due to where I think you are. Like a 21 festival, shall we say, due to where you are at the current moment. But maybe you are. Aw, that's a bummer. Can I virtually ice you? Somehow I'll virtually ice you. I'll hide it on the screen. And then when you find it, I have to drink it. Well, Shiv, thank you for coming here on your special birthday. Happy birthday. That's the most important thing here tonight. Everybody go wear a scarf for Shiv. Scarves for Shivs. And I will see you all next week at 7:30 for the next chapter. All right. I will see you soon. Happy birthday and goodbye. Thanks for coming in. See you later. Goodbye.